Guys, thanks for attending on this one. As we were putting the content together, a couple of things just really stood out to me on this. Number one, let me be clear, Microsoft Copilot, at least its general availability for small and medium-sized businesses, technically only launched at the end of January. So the information that I'm presenting here is based on 2 to 3 months of experience of working with Copilot, helping clients start to navigate the conversations around it. But really, Copilot is just another product. It takes some interesting steps to bring AI into approachability. It brings AI to where you actually live, where your business information is. And I'll talk through what that looks like. But it requires the same sort of risk management considerations for any product that you're looking at adopting within your organizations. You have to be thinking about your cybersecurity posture. You have to be thinking about your data hygiene, how your information is structured. You have to be thinking about who should be your first adopters and what's it take to actually be successful and get some benefit out of this. When I showed our marketing manager what my thoughts were on what I wanted to present, he said, well, I should retitle the seminar. So I've retitled the seminar to, well, let's call it AI made relatively easier. And I'm not intending that as a bait and switch, but I don't want to diminish that you've got two paths on this. You could absolutely just go out and we can help you subscribe to Microsoft Copilot or Copilot for Microsoft 365. And it literally is just installing a license and turning it on and activating it for users. And that is by far the easiest way that I've ever seen AI being able to be brought into a business environment. But from a business perspective, you then have to ask, well, what happens beyond my first user? What happens when I want to really start leveraging this for business? What's that look like? And that's what we're going to call the relatively easier part. I'm going to do a little bit of pretext here and say, well, what is AI? I'm not going to go through all the types of AI, but I am going to focus in and say Copilot specifically is a large language model, natural language processing, generative AI. And if you'd like to learn more about what that actually means, we did a webinar way back when in the dark ages, September 2023, where we did one called AI Made Simple, where we took all these terms and said, well, AI is this big thing. You're seeing streaming media, you're seeing YouTube advertisements for AI, you're seeing the IBMs and the Microsofts out there, and everybody's saying we're doing AI, but nobody really defines what it is. That AI Made Simple webinar that we did back in September 2023 walks through a lot of those concepts. For today, we're really going to focus on what Microsoft is doing with AI, specifically with their Copilot offerings, which is really bringing AI into the realm of, you can just subscribe to it and start using it within your business environments. Fundamentally, Copilot is an example of AI changing the way that we work with software. In traditional software, you had to build up user skills. You had to know the menus. You had to know the commands. You could become a Microsoft Excel expert. You could become a PowerPoint expert or a Word expert. And you can still do all those things. That interface hasn't gone away. But the important thing in traditional environments is you have to adapt to what the software does. I'm sure you've all had moments where you've been working on a document and thought, man, I just want it to be formatted this way. And you've got to go through all these little commands to figure it out. That's changing with AI-powered software or AI becoming part of the interface. When AI is part of the interface, it's non-deterministic. The software isn't putting you in a box. You're able to interface and say, I want this. And I'll actually show you, and I've even got a practical example that I did with Microsoft Excel last week that I got the answer back from Copilot. And I was like, wow, that saved me at least 5 to 10 minutes of Google searching and experimentation to solve the problem. The software adapts to what you're expressing you want it to do. And the thing that's really exciting about Copilot for Microsoft 365 is it's able to do that with knowledge of your business information that you already have stored in the Microsoft 365 suite. That's your email, that's your calendar, that's your Teams meetings, that's your contacts, that's the Word documents, that's SharePoint, that's Excel, that's PowerPoint. Suddenly it's not, I'm getting back generic answers. It's able to actually provide answers that are based on the context of the information that you're working on. AI is following an interesting curve here. I don't want to call AI hype, but I do want to call this out. You guys, if you've attended AI webinars, if you've seen some of the Microsoft content, you've probably seen this. This is how long it took specific technologies to reach 100 million users. Mobile phones, 16 years. Compare that to ChatGPT. When ChatGPT went live, Within 3 months, it hit 100 million unique users. Now, that's really interesting in that there's a lot of interest in what this technology could potentially do, but we've got to be aware that there's this hype cycle, and this is not specific to AI. This is in general. We see this sort of thing, and that, ooh, there's a shiny object. There's something coming. It can do anything. If you've experimented with ChatGPT, you've probably been really impressed with some of the things that it's been able to do. Some of its responses look, wow, that's an amazing synthesis. So that's a huge head start. But there's other things you've asked it for where you've been like, ugh, that's really not useful at all. And you experimented with it, but you have to go to it to use it. It's not integrated into your workflow. And if you ask yourself, you probably tapered off a little bit. You went and experimented with it, said, hey, what's all the buzz about? And then you realized, okay, it takes some work to actually do it, and your usage has kind of fallen off a little bit. We go into that trough of disillusionment, which is a normal technology adoption life cycle of, great, we tried all these cool things, but it didn't stick. Now we're down here, and then we start moving up this slope of enlightenment where we're trying to figure out how are we going to turn that into a productive tool. The cool part about the Copilot for Microsoft 365, we're trying to bridge that gap. We're trying to get past that slope and say, let's just bring it to where you already work and let you use it in natural ways along the way. Just to illustrate this hype cycle, these are the ChatGPT monthly users over time. So we see that whoop, peak, and then it drops down, and then it starts to level out and balance. We may not hit that same trough because there's this constant influx of people experimenting with the product, wondering what can it do, and it's kind of staying in the public interest, but you aren't hearing it in daily headlines anymore. Similarly, the Google search trends for things like generative AI, boom, big surge of interest, falls off, tapers, and we kind of hit this new level on it. So I think overall, most people are about here when we're talking about AI. They're great. It's a thing. I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet. Maybe I found a couple of use cases. Maybe it's kind of fun to play with, but I'm not actually invested in using it, and I have to go to it to make it work, or it takes a lot of effort to do it. Maybe there are some quick wins where AI is able to be brought into a product or solve a business problem, and it's really sticky for those things, but you recognize it requires maintenance. It doesn't just do it on its own. It's going to require continuing effort to make it work. Many people are about to be here where, well, we go down slope and it's like, yep, AI was very 2022, 2023. They don't necessarily know all the other things that are happening with it, and it has to be a mature product to really start leveraging. So what we really want to get to is right to here. We want to move into where you can actually start using it for business productivity. And that's really what Copilot for Microsoft 365 is about. Copilot is really low cost and it's low risk to get started with. If you already have reasonable cybersecurity controls, if you already have reasonable data hygiene, you can turn Copilot on and just start using it. And it starts reining in some of the things that you've already got risks in your environment. I mentioned at the start that this is really about risk management and being able to leverage a new technology to say, I want to improve productivity, I want to increase revenue, reduce costs, all those things. Right now, today in your environments, you probably have shadow IT. People go out and use ChatGPT. They sign up for it. Maybe they don't even sign up for it. They just use the public interface. You don't necessarily know, and you don't have control over what happens if one of your coworkers, one of your team members provides data to a ChatGPT engine that contains privileged or private or even controlled information from your organization. They put it into those bots. Those AIs will then give them very interesting results, but if it's free, they're actually the product. And so they're able to take that information and start training it. And there have been documented cases where information has resurfaced outside of the original requester because it's learning along the way. It's just getting better and better and better. You're contributing to the product. Something like Copilot for Microsoft 365 gives you data privacy controls that you don't have with those other public platforms. You do want to be careful about the quality of the outputs that you're going to get from something like this. ChatGPT and a number of the other AI tools, if you ask them something very specific about your business, the best you're going to get is a generic answer, maybe drawn from market conditions or public internet sources or academic sources, but it's not going to be something that actually references the project that you were working on last week or the spreadsheet or the document that you really need summarized. They're not built to be able to do that. Copilot bridges that gap, and now we can actually start working with your business level information. The real advantage to Copilot is you're leveraging Microsoft's R&D, all the investment they've made, and they're part of the OpenAI initiative. They're one of the big players in the OpenAI initiative that includes ChatGPT. You are now able to just subscribe as a consumer to the cost of Copilot for Microsoft 365 at a very low cost and get the benefit of all the R&D effort that Microsoft has made. It is very complicated. That's not fair. It is time consuming, and it is a considered process in order to implement AI for a unique function and a unique purpose. Whenever you can leverage someone else's R&D and gain the benefit of the productivity, you are way ahead of the curve because your cost to enter is so low that any gain is significant ROI, and it's available to you, and it's approachable to all of your users. Speaking of approachability, when we talk about AI, one of the challenges with introducing any new tool, and it's not just AI, if you think about the last major application you had to roll out inside your business or the major cloud initiative that you had, it's hard to get people to change their work habits, to come to use the new tool, to make it part of their workflow so you actually get the business benefit of it. You can do AI via the web today. You can go visit websites like ChatGPT or Copilot. You can use integrated AI experiences that are actually integrated in the applications that you use every day. And that's not limited to Copilot. A lot of the major vendors out there that provide SaaS applications, whether it's specialized AP or AR or contract management or document management, you're seeing them start to put more and more AI features directly into the product interface so that you don't have to change your work habits. The AI is just there as an extension to the tool. They're building their value, but you're able to leverage it in a much more natural, fluid way. The role-based is where you now are using AI and it's doing specific functions, or it understands it's got an expertise in a particular stack. And that's still in the more advanced category. Lots of options available there, but not quite as just turn on the switch and approachable. Copilot for Microsoft 365 really lives right here in the middle. And I should differentiate. I'm using a couple of terms interchangeably, and I'll use this a little later on in the slide deck. I think now Microsoft is up to 8 or 9 separate Copilot offers. So when you see Copilot, it actually makes a difference on, do you see the word Copilot? Do you see Copilot for Microsoft 365? Do you see Copilot for Sales or Copilot for Service? Do you see Copilot Pro? All of those are different offers, and we'll talk through those. But the two that I'm focusing on are Copilot, which is the web-based copilot.microsoft.com portal, and the Copilot for Microsoft 365 offer, which is the one that integrates into Outlook and Teams and Excel and PowerPoint and ties your information together. Now, part of the challenge here, and I mentioned at the start, AI is not deterministic. The output that AI gives you is the sum total of everything it's been trained on, the sum total of what it has to work with, and what you've asked. And if you ask the same question of the same AI engine, you probably aren't going to get exactly the same answer. It's a little bit of a challenge there. So I'm actually going to use a couple of recorded demos because my intent here is not to just highlight all the cool things you can do with Copilot. I'm going to assume that most of you already have a basic understanding about what Copilot for Microsoft 365 can do. I'm going to use some Microsoft produced videos to demo specific use cases within this, but then we're going to focus on what the business adoption of a technology like Copilot really looks like. So without further ado, let me jump into a Copilot demo here. And I'll let Brian let me know if for any reason this is not working, but I'm going to start this stream. This is only a couple minutes.
Imagine you have an appointment that conflicts with your weekly business review. What if you could do both? With Copilot, you can opt to follow a meeting. After the meeting ends, Copilot will summarize what you missed. You'll get a notification in Teams when the recap is ready. This recap will highlight content that was shared, summarize notes, and any action items for you or others whose names were mentioned. You see that one of your customers was discussed, and you want to learn more. You can ask Copilot clarifying questions, and it provides a detailed response. It can tell you why a certain decision was made, and gives you helpful context. You can even ask Copilot what other solutions were considered, and it provides citations from the transcript so you can see where Copilot drew these conclusions, It's a huge time saver. So that was pretty cool. But the real magic of Copilot happens during a live meeting. Let's say you're in a meeting with your team. You can ask Copilot to summarize the meeting so far. You can see how it summarizes who said what points were made, and it's really capturing the spirit of the discussion. And as the meeting progresses, you can check in on where people stand. You can even ask Copilot what questions are unresolved. It's just amazing to see this happen in real time during a meeting.
Let's do one more here. I'm going to do Microsoft Outlook. This will not be death by video.
Copilot in Outlook can help you prioritize your time and stay on top of meetings. Here you've been invited to a meeting that conflicts with the meeting you're planning to attend. Clearly, you can only attend one. From the meeting invite, you can choose to RSVP with Follow. Switching over to your calendar, you can see that you're now following this meeting. Once the meeting starts on Teams, the organizer will receive a notification to record the meeting because someone is following it. Now, after the meeting is done and the recording is ready, Copilot will notify you that the meeting recap is ready for you to review. You can then ask Copilot some questions about the meeting, like, summarize this meeting, or are there any action items for me? That way you can stay on top of things as if you were present during the meeting.
So let me call out a couple of things from that. Those of you who are paying attention probably noticed that those Microsoft videos, the calendars that they were demonstrating from, were dated September 2023. And at that time, Copilot was in a pre-release where it was enterprise space only. This was only available, I think the minimum subscription size was basically outside the realm of what a small business would even be able to consider. And one of the things that Microsoft announced in January and February of this year was they have eliminated the floors. You can subscribe to Copilot with one user. So all the things that they built with the original enterprise audience in mind and then the mid-sized business in mind, it is open. And talk about low risk and low cost being able to do something like this. The other thing that I want to point out is this data is 6 months old. Those demos are 6 months old at this point. Copilot has continued to evolve to the point where Copilot is actually a natural part of the interface of the modern Microsoft 365 Office suite. When you open up a new Word document, there's actually a little Copilot logo that's right there, and the first thing that appears is actually a Copilot prompt asking, what would you like to start writing about? And I've seen our team members even start leveraging that to get about a 60% head start on the first draft of, I want to write a document like this. Okay, great. Here, let's start filling in the details. And then it lets you iteratively refine along the way to get closer and closer to what you're thinking of. So it gives you that head start. I've got a couple of additional demos that I do want to show. These are the last two videos that I've got. I want to show you what Copilot looks like in Word and what it looks like in Excel, and then I'll talk about some specific examples that I've personally seen. Let me grab this, and I will flip this over here, and we will do this one for Word.
When you've written a paragraph in shorthand, you can highlight it and click Rewrite. Copilot then offers several alternate options to choose from that are all written professionally. And it can translate wordy or complex paragraphs into digestible visualized tables. You can even use Copilot to add a column with extra data, which it can complete automatically. Copilot also makes you the expert on any document. Simply ask a question about the content, and Copilot will provide a concise response.
And I'll grab one more here with Microsoft Excel.
Copilot puts all the rich capabilities of Excel at your fingertips. Say you need to analyze this quarter's sales results for the monthly business review. You start by asking Copilot to analyze the data and give you 3 key trends. Within seconds, you've got what you need, but you want to drill in. You ask Copilot a follow-up question about one of the trends. Copilot creates a new sheet, giving you a sandbox to play in, and helping you get a better understanding of what's happening without modifying the data in the original sheet. You ask Copilot to visualize what contributed to the decline in sales growth this period. Copilot adds a little color to make the problem jump off the page. Now you want to dig a little deeper and ask a follow-up question with a what-if scenario. Copilot not only answers your question, it creates a simple model of the scenario, and even asks you if you want to learn more about what it did with a step-by-step breakdown. Finally, you can ask it to create a graph of your projected model. Copilot has turned a sea of data into clear insights and actions.
I'm going to share one of my own Excel examples, and that Excel demo is great at showing some of the analysis and pattern recognition capabilities of the Copilot skill set, which is continuing to evolve. Every week I'm seeing new announcements of Copilot can now do this, Copilot can now do this, here's things to try, and I'll show you some examples of those. Just this week, I was working with a set of Microsoft Azure data, and I was trying to analyze the spend patterns of Microsoft Azure Virtual Cloud or public cloud data. And Microsoft gave me all the data, and then I was looking at these long field names, like the first bold-faced example, and I was realizing, really all I need is the name that's at the end of it. Sure, I could have gone to Google, I could have gone into the Excel help and said, you know what, how do I just get rid of it all except for that last little bit? But instead, and these are my actual screenshots, I went into Copilot over on the side in Excel, and I said, hey, I want a formula in this column that includes just the text after the final forward slash from the other column on the same row. And Copilot thought about it for about, I think it took 10 seconds or so, and then it came back and it gave me, here's the formula, and it understood the context about what I was asking for, and it even gave me the finished formula. All I was able to do at the end, I hit copy and I hit paste and I dropped it into that column, and notice that its example even included the reference to the column name that I said that I wanted to use as the source. I didn't have to edit the formula at all, and it worked first try. Also notice up at the top, the thing that Copilot responded back with said, here's a formula to review and insert. The review and insert is an important caveat. AI is not perfect. I know that in the prior AI webinars, I've called out, hey, look, the guy in the front photo is missing feet. In this particular photo that got generated, the guy that's in the center, his chair doesn't have any legs on the right-hand side, but you probably don't notice those things. But AI does not create perfect results out of the box. AI gets you started. It gets you over that initial creativity hump, or I just need something to start with. How many of you have tried to problem solve looking at a just totally blank whiteboard and you're like, what do I even do with this? If you can phrase that as a question, Copilot gets you started with it, and then Copilot advises you every step of the way. Just understand you're taking responsibility for what this is going to be doing. I'm going to try to help you out, but I'm not going to solve the problem for you because I don't necessarily know all the skills and experience that you have. It still requires a person to look at it. It's the equivalent to the car commercials where everybody's driving great cars across the desert, sliding sideways, professional driver on close course. Do not attempt and all that. Copilot gets you to the point where, okay, it's up to you now. I've got you started. You can do what you need to do. When you're interested in what Copilot can actually do for you, Microsoft has actually put this public, you can actually access this right now, copilot.cloud.microsoft/in-us/prompts. Copilot keeps a running tally of, hey, these are cool things that we are seeing people use Copilot for, that we have seen new skills developed. There's nothing in here that has private data or private information. This is aggregated information, but you'll see things like, hey, Copilot can now do these things. Because, hey, what's the latest from this person organized by email, chats, and files? I'd like to draft an email with this sort of content. Could you tell that it's AI written? Yeah, probably. Is it going to write with the same flair that you do? Probably not. Is it going to get you 60, maybe 70% of the way there? So all you have to do is edit it and personalize it. Yeah. If you just send that email, someone's going to look at it and say, well, this is kind of generic and it may not necessarily be as personal, but it gets you that far that quickly. That's where the productivity benefits of Copilot are. So let's talk about how much Copilot actually costs to deploy. And I mentioned at the start, it's low cost and low risk. First of all, there's the Copilot web version at copilot.microsoft.com, which you can go to right now and you can use it without any Microsoft subscriptions. But the real power of it is when you already have a Microsoft 365 subscription for your users, like Microsoft 365 Business Premium. If you do, then on the upper right corner, you can click on sign in. And once you sign in with your Microsoft 365 Business Premium or equivalent account, it will actually show a badge that says you are now in a protected mode. It's a nice big green badge. Once that's there, you have corporate data privacy. By people authenticating to the Copilot site with their organization's credentials that you're providing, that they're already using every day for their email, you now have data privacy. So it's so much better than just the public websites that don't give you that data privacy. In addition, once you subscribe to the next tier up, Copilot for Microsoft 365, there's a nice little toggle up in the corner. I'll show you what that looks like. Once you have the full Copilot for Microsoft 365 subscription, even the website version understands your business information, because after all, it's a SaaS application. Just like you can use Outlook on the web, or Word in a web browser, or Excel in a web browser, you can run Copilot for Microsoft 365 in a web browser, and it's accessible from wherever you are. It does require you to authenticate to it, because it's got to respect your security and your data privacy, but it's such a powerful tool. All of that gets unlocked with that Copilot for Microsoft 365 subscription, which is $360 per user per year. As AI projects go, that is super cheap, and you are still leveraging all of the continuous improvements that Microsoft is putting into it. The photo that's over on the right, I actually grabbed that one yesterday because Microsoft announced at least one more Copilot service that wasn't there when I built all these decks a couple of weeks ago. That product list is a list of all the various Microsoft Copilot offerings. So there's some very specific things, some role specific things. When you're talking about Copilot, let's keep the conversation to Copilot for Microsoft 365. That is really the play that gives you access to all this business information and the integrations that you saw within those application demos. So what's it take to actually launch Copilot in your organization? Well, think through this in 3 steps. I love 3 steps. So let's talk through this in 3 steps. Number 1, how significant is your potential risk? And then number 2, how many team members should get it? Number 3, how will you know if you're getting your money's worth on it? So to assess your risk, fortunately, there's a framework for this. Microsoft themselves has published what they call a Copilot readiness assessment. And I know for everybody that's attending, we'll make a Copilot readiness assessment for you. Your Aldridge principal consultant can actually walk through that Copilot readiness with you. We're your technology experts. We want to make sure that we're helping you navigate this. If you aren't currently an Aldridge client, we can still send you a self-paced Copilot readiness assessment. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Q&A gives you a Copilot readiness score. It asks you questions like, well, I'll show you what some of the questions are, but we want to make sure you've got the right licensing, that you've got the right prereqs, that your information is stored in a place that you're going to get value from it. You also want to consider your user account security, and I'll talk through this a bit more. If a user account is not secure and has Copilot, we're handing a threat actor a potentially very valuable tool to get to the information that they shouldn't be able to get to even easier. And the last bit is the information security, or your data hygiene. How is the information organized within your environment such that Copilot can actually access it, but respect who should be able to see what? When you're thinking about how many teams should get it, well, I mean, clearly, as many as you can, turn it on. But you really want to focus in on your early adopters and the people that are going to be experimenters and are going to give you feedback on it. Think about it in terms of working groups. Maybe the executive team gets it, or the directors get it, or the managers of a particular unit get it, or all the people within one team under one manager get it, so they can collaborate and think through. And then how will you know that you're getting your money's worth? Well, you can check the usage on it. There are administrative reports that won't necessarily easily tell you all the queries that people are making, although you can do that. There's data privacy, there's administration. If you have those administrator rights to do like discovery, to go search for an email or search for a file, you technically have the administrative rights to say what were the queries that were made to Copilot, what was returned, or at least what was the experience. But as importantly, it's a people conversation to build the wins and build the feedback cycle, to walk down the hall and say, guys, I need to show you something I just did with Copilot that made me go, wow. As part of prepping for this, I took an early outline of this that was in Word, and I went over to PowerPoint, and I said, PowerPoint, create a slide deck from this outline. And PowerPoint sat there and worked on it in Copilot for about 60 seconds, and then it produced a 40-slide deck with photos that were relevant to the topics. All the slides matched the outline structure, all the text blocks. It did variations in layout and theming, and while it wasn't perfect, it got me 60% of the way there. Now, granted, we ended up taking a slightly different direction with this. This is our slide deck. We didn't use Copilot for all of this, but it made both of us go, just wow, that was amazing, where Copilot was able to take an outline in Word and produce a PowerPoint deck that was ready to be customized and staged and maybe further branded along the way. From a readiness and risk management standpoint, you have to think, what type of organization are you? What's your operating environment? If you are in a low concern environment, you work with very little sensitive data, or you're comfortable that the risk of data being provided to someone in your organization that you'd be surprised could get that, if you think that's low, you can just turn Copilot on. A good example for this is if you want to turn it on to your leadership team. Your leadership team probably already has access to the majority of the information that you have in your organization. So there's very little incremental risk to turn this tool on and start experimenting with it, see what it can do. But you probably aren't going to gain the same level of benefit as if you turned it on for your knowledge workers and your process workers, the people that are taking information and transforming it or creating it and synthesizing it so that you've got the organization moving forward. Just different levels of approach. Most businesses are probably going to fall into the conscientious category, where you're aware that you've got some sensitive information that's stored in Microsoft 365. You might have a SharePoint library that has HR information, or you might have business strategy information, things like that. And you want to be sure that that's securely stored and organized before you turn Copilot on for your organization. Copilot respects those things. I'll talk a bit more about that. Lastly, you might be in this third category. I love my 3 buckets, this regulated category, where you are in a regulated or a compliance-based industry, and you have to be certain that your information that needs to be secured is appropriately secured. Copilot doesn't make any information that wasn't already available more available. It just makes it easier to get to that information. I could ask a query of Copilot, say, hey, what's the payroll information for 2023 Q4? While I may not know where that's stored, if it's stored in a place in Microsoft 365 that is not properly secured, such that the user asking it has permissions to be able to get to it, Copilot's going to very helpfully respond back with the information. Now, granted, that's the same information they could have gotten if they browsed the file share or if they've done a file search. Copilot just lowers the barrier as far as accessibility to get to the information they already had access to. When we're talking about doing those assessments, the first one, the Copilot Readiness Assessment, I'll show you a couple of screenshots of what this looks like, is really there to answer the question, are you using Microsoft 365 in a way today that you're going to be able to get immediate value out of Copilot? The cybersecurity posture assessment is, do you have the right controls about your user security such that you can be sure that the people that are able to use Copilot are the people that should be able to use. You've all seen social media attack, or not social media, but social engineering attacks, business email compromise, and you're aware of the types of harm that a threat actor can cause if they compromise someone's email box. Well, that requires the threat actor to go through and start reading through a bunch of email. Imagine how much easier it would be for that threat actor if the account they compromised had Copilot. Now they can just go over to Copilot and start asking a list of pre-built questions that they feed in to see what Copilot responds to, and it does the data discovery for them. Again, it's not exposing new information. It's just making the information that was already there easier and faster to get to. So it's very important that we secure your user accounts and put the detection and the response and the recovery processes around those for cybersecurity, so you aren't potentially creating a larger surface area inadvertently. And then the data hygiene assessment, what's stored where, how's it secured? So the Copilot Readiness Assessment, the output of this looks like you get a score of how many or how closely aligned are you to get a good Copilot experience. And it will call out blocking issues that will say you can't actually use Copilot yet until you do this, this, and this. Some of the blocking issues, for example, might be you aren't licensed for Microsoft 365 for all of your users yet, or you are using shared accounts in Microsoft 365. You've got to use individual user accounts for this to work for at least the people that you want to have Copilot for Microsoft 365. Or you could be using an older version of Microsoft Office versus the Microsoft 365 integrated productivity suite, which is actually required in order to be able to leverage Copilot. So it's about 24 questions, 27 questions, it might be up to 30 now, that just walk you through, do you have the right piece in place? And I'll call out again, you don't have to do that on your own. Your Aldridge principal consultant that you're already working with is going to be able to walk through this assessment with you and help you determine, are you ready? What block are you in? Can we just turn it on? Are you going to get benefit from it? When we start looking at a cybersecurity assessment, we're really talking about the same sort of cybersecurity that we always talk about for IT infrastructure. The conversation used to be IT, and then the conversation became IT plus cybersecurity, and that's still true. Now there's three pieces to the conversation: IT plus cybersecurity plus AI. And that's really our world that we're going to be operating in over the course of the next 3 to 5 years until there's a category 4. We just keep expanding these out, and they are separate disciplines that we have to consider the strength of your infrastructure, the strength of your security, and now we have to consider the strength of your AI. That's part of what we're trying to do when I'm bringing you this information to say forward looking. I'm going to give you a head start on this stuff. But the cybersecurity assessment is the same assessment that we're already doing with you. We want to make sure that you've got the right tools in place, you have the right processes in place, you've got the right levels of user identification in place, and if something goes wrong, you have the right levels of detection in place. I recognize that there are some people on the webinar today that are not necessarily clients yet. So just as a screenshot opportunity, and I know we will be sharing out the recording and the slide deck afterwards. When I'm talking about cybersecurity today, really I'm talking about the 2024 standard. You need to have these things to be a business operating in today's threat environment. That's one part of it. It's a very tactical, product-focused part of it. The other part of it is make sure you have the processes and the expertise in place so that all those things work together and actually provide the layer of security that you're thinking of. Again, something we can help with. The data hygiene assessment is really about going through and running a tagging or a content analysis, where are your files stored in Microsoft 365? Are you using SharePoint the way it's designed to be used? Do you have libraries set up for specific groups? Do you have security established for those particular groups? I'm getting ahead of myself. The slides are lagging behind me. You want to make sure that you've already got your information organized in a way that Copilot can respect successfully the way you'd want it to. You might have an executive team library, for example, that only the executive team are members of the security group that can access the executive team library content. You might have an HR library. You might have a number of different things, but it goes beyond that too, because this is part of the culture and your business approach. Imagine if somebody was emailing just attached files of secure information around inside your organization. Copilot's going to have a very hard time keeping that secure because it's already insecure. It's very important that that sort of sensitive information is treated appropriately by your organization, is kept in central repositories that have access controls and logging about them, so that you can actually maintain business level control over what is sensitive, especially if you're in a regulated or compliance-based industry. But really, it's for any conscientious company to manage your real assets, the information that you're delivering out, that you're using, that's giving you that competitive advantage in your production. You may even have customer information, you may have vendor information. All of that could be sensitive as well. There's a quick self-test that you can do if you're interested about what your data hygiene looks like and you're already a Microsoft 365 subscriber. You already have this tool, and it's called Delve, Microsoft Delve. It has been out for years. I use it all the time. You go to delve.office.com and it will show you a list of all the files that you've recently worked on, the things your coworkers have recently worked on in areas that you have access to. One of the things that you can do is if you have somebody that you know works on sensitive information inside your organization, you can go talk to them, have them open up delve.office.com and do a search for one of their files. And when they search for one of the files, they can click on that little ... menu in the lower right-hand corner of that file and say, who else has access? Is that list who you'd expect that would have access to it? If there are people on that list that you shouldn't have access, then the real challenge is you don't have your information organized and you don't have a policy or a culture of information control and sharing. You could turn Copilot on in that sort of organization, but just understand Copilot lowers the barrier to get to the information that people already have access to. I will caution you, the first time you go into Delve, you might freak out and you say, Delve's telling everybody everything that I do. And no, it doesn't. Delve tells everybody the things you've been collaborating on that all the people that are viewing it have simultaneous access to. It's the exact same place if they went and browsed to the files themselves. They'd be able to go see that. If you're working on a private file in your own OneDrive, it doesn't show up in Delve for anybody else unless you've shared it with them, at which point it will show up in their Delve. So it respects, and this is really the advantage of Microsoft Copilot. And the Copilot for Microsoft 365 is it respects the data privacy and the security model of everything else you're already relying upon in Microsoft 365. When it's set up correctly, Copilot just mines that value and gives you so much additional detail. Go ahead, Brian.
We've got quite a few questions coming in, so I just wanted to interrupt you here.
Time check.
Knock some of those out if you don't mind.
Sure.
One of the questions we had is back to the meeting recordings and how Copilot can work there. Do attendees of the meetings that are recorded have an opportunity to remove things from the transcript before they're shared by AI and other means?
They do not. So the way that works with Copilot is we turn a setting on inside your Microsoft 365 tenant such that the meetings get recorded by default, which makes them accessible to Copilot. Copilot can only work with a meeting recording that already exists. It can't create one retroactively. So the two options are to either turn on recording manually if you're one of the participants or turn on recording afterwards. But there is not a facility within it to proactively say, Copilot, forget I said that, and have it exempted from the transcript, or at least not that I'm aware of today. Next week, who knows?
And this is a question for me. The option to follow, that's only available for people that are actually invited to the meeting to begin with, correct?
Yes. If you can't attend the meeting, you have the option to follow the meeting, and you get a Copilot-based summary of the meeting afterwards.
Got it. Another question related to those videos, what kind of cloud storage implications may result from recording so many meetings? And is meeting recording an option we can turn off at the admin level if desired?
So second question first, yes. You can, by policy within your Microsoft 365 tenant, say meeting recording is not available for anyone, which I wouldn't recommend. We find that feature really valuable, even internally within Aldridge for what we do. The default setting is meetings are only recorded if you elect to do it, if a participant elects to do it. And there is a third option where you can say all meetings are recorded, which maybe if you're in a regulatory or compliance situation, you may want to do something like that, but I'm sure there's other implications. Going to the first question, most Microsoft 365 subscriptions store the meeting recordings in the OneDrive of the participant that initiated the recording, and your OneDrive capacity is technically unlimited. So your Microsoft subscription, and this can vary by your subscription, but let's assume that you've got at least 100 gigs of storage available to you for meeting recordings. And meeting recordings by default, unless you override the setting, expire after, I think it's 90 days. It will automatically delete the meeting recording if you're not doing anything with it, or if you haven't gone back to the meeting recording and said preserve it. We use meeting recordings all the time within Aldridge. I have not hit any recording size limits. It's all based in Microsoft Cloud Storage. I have not gotten any warnings that we are filling up any sort of cloud storage, and we use it a lot.
All right. I've got a few more coming in, but I'll let you finish because I think you're going to answer some of the others.
Cool. We'll answer some of the others here. Thank you, Brian. So going back to that question, that second question of how many people should get it, keep in mind it's an effective zero cost. If Copilot saves somebody who makes about $70K a year, only 1 hour a month. If you can get 1 hour of productivity back, you have paid for Copilot for that user. Because after all, you're paying $30 a month. If you amortize it out over the course of a year, it's $360 per user per year. It doesn't take much productivity boost, and it doesn't all come at once. It's not a 1 hour, woohoo, here we go. It saved me 5 minutes here. It saved me 5 minutes here. It saved me 2 minutes here. It saved me 10 minutes here. It saved me 15 minutes here. Microsoft's early adopters and Microsoft's research on this suggests that the typical adopter that actually makes Copilot part of their workflow, and they leverage the tool not as a focused effort, but as a natural extension of using the software, saves about 5 hours a month of productivity, gives them 5 hours of head start every month. The people that you're thinking about using Copilot, you probably saw through the demos, people that do knowledge management, information synthesis, communication, coordination, they may realize the fastest benefits. Copilot is a large language model, natural language processing AI. The more of that you need to do, the better Copilot's going to be. Copilot is probably not going to help someone that might be doing frontline transactional, where they're just working inside a transaction processing system. It may not provide much assistance for someone that has a technical checklist over and over again process. They're not doing a lot of synthesis or creation of new content or compilation or summarization of content. But again, there might be bits and pieces. We've been experimenting it even internally with using it for statements of work, not because we wanted to write our statements of work for projects, but because it can take our standard template as one input, the details that we've recorded about the project or the potential project in another, and examples of other successful projects, and synthesize that down into a statement of work that actually has a basic work plan. Gets us 60% of the way there in 5 to 10 minutes versus 30 to 60 minutes. We start getting those benefits. And then what's your ROI? So Copilot is not expensive, so it's really not that hard to put an ROI around it. But a lot of businesses start thinking about it. Well, I've got 100 users. Am I going to drop $36,000 on Copilot? You've got to answer that question. And to do that, you have to be able to justify it. So think through, how effective is your Copilot launch going to be? Are you building buy-in? Are you building enthusiasm? Are you building a feedback loop? Are you setting expectations that I want to know about the Copilot wins? If you're not using Copilot, that's fine. I'm not going to force you to use Copilot, but you may not have it next year because I might turn it back off. So let's celebrate the wins. Let's figure out the ways that we're boosting our productivity with it, not because we want to celebrate Copilot, but we want to celebrate the ways that it's making our lives easier so other people learn how to use it and get more leverage out of it. You can measure the adoption process of Copilot. If you've got administrative access, or your Aldridge principal consultant can do this as part of your QBRs, we can pull the usage information for Copilot. It doesn't show all the detailed queries in it. That's a discovery search, which is entirely different. You've got the capability to do that, but this is really just an aggregated statistics of how often are the people that are licensed for Copilot using Copilot. So you can see who's really championing it, who's experimenting with it, and who got the license and then just kind of moved on and didn't make it part of the workflow. That comes back to the idea of set your success criteria, set your expectations, share your aha moments, give the feedback, and then do a user training plan on it. That Microsoft Copilot Labs with all the various prompts, that is great training material to help people understand what Copilot's capable of doing. But even beyond that, people that are subscribed to Copilot get, it's not a weekly email, but I get at least a couple of them a month saying, Copilot can now do this. Try this in Copilot. Copilot can now do this. And I'm learning new things. Oh, I didn't think about using it for that before. That's kind of exciting. When you build this launch plan, deploy it to your early adopter groups. Your early adopters uncover the use cases, become the champions. They can share the wins within the organization, and it builds on itself. Create those processes and try to get that 1 hour of productivity gain on average per person, and Copilot's free. It's paid for itself. When you're looking at Copilot in the admin center, you're able to see stats like this. I just talked about some of these. This is aggregated across a much larger Microsoft enterprise set. And it's sample data from a Microsoft slide, so this is not live or anything. You see this is from October of 2023. But you can see details about who's adopting it, how often are they using it, what's your Copilot rollout look like, are you getting traction? When you turn Copilot on for a user, because after all, some of you may be thinking there's very low risk, and I've got my candidate pilot case. You assign a Copilot for Microsoft 365 license to each user. Within an hour or so, each of those users receive a welcome email that looks just like that. The welcome email includes the initial tips, tricks, and links to the training resources. So Microsoft's making it pretty easy for you to get the training materials out to people. Again, you're looking for your self-starters, and you need to announce it to them ahead of time to say, I'm going to give you this. Here's what I want you to do with it. And meanwhile, in the background, after you turn on your first Copilot license, Copilot starts assembling what's called the semantic index, and it's looking through the information that you have in Microsoft 365, and it only does this once you license Copilot, and it starts building the relationships in your information. That is private information that is within your Microsoft 365 tenant. Microsoft does not use it to train their system. It doesn't share it outside of your tenants. This is secure as your email, as secure as the other files you have stored in SharePoint, but it takes it a day or two to build up that semantic index so that it can actually start answering queries with business level context. Once you get Copilot, users can still visit copilot.microsoft.com, but again, now they'll be able to sign in the upper right to secure their queries. They get the protected badge, and they'll be able to toggle from web to work mode to begin working with their actual real business information. And I'm fortunate that I grabbed this screenshot when I did, because I think that site has even changed again. We're seeing evolution on that at least once a month, sometimes once a week, where that site keeps getting new features on it. Within a day of getting a Copilot license, users are going to see Copilot features appear in their Microsoft Office applications. Many of you have probably gotten the advertisement saying it's time to go to the new Outlook. You have to have new Outlook to be able to use Copilot. You have to have the Microsoft 365 connected apps for these tools to work. So next steps on this: encourage or maybe require your organization to avoid using free online AI tools. Start using copilot.microsoft.com. Get the message out that this is what we're going to start using as the tool. It's already included. And especially if you've got Microsoft 365 Business Premium, you already have the data privacy controls. Now you can actually give people a sanctioned AI solution that they can start working with no licensing costs. You're already subscribed to Microsoft 365 Business Premium. You can already get protected data access. Consider your your readiness and your risk management posture. Consider doing a Copilot readiness assessment. Aldridge Principal Consultant, great resource for that. Consider a cybersecurity posture assessment, and consider that data hygiene assessment. And of course, yes, we can help you navigate all this stuff. Once you're ready, choose your first adopters, communicate, set those expectations, activate it, solicit feedback and wins. Go experiment, go play with it, measure the adoption and expand the usage as you see the productivity gains and you realize, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. It makes everything else that we do a lot easier.